So for this lesson, I've created a choice board and I've created it through Google Slides, so it is interactive. Once you have access to the Google Slides, go into present mode on Google Slides and you'll be able to interact with this. So the assignment for this unit is both portrait and still life choice board. The reason I included both portrait and still life in the same unit this year is because of COVID and my students are working from home and they might not have access to models for the portrait unit. Typically in the classroom, students can use my studio space. So for this one, I am allowing students to create portrait only or still life only pictures or any combination that you want. So I've created for you 16 different images to choose from based on the vocabulary that we learned from lesson number 1. And you get to choose 5 of the following images. So what you want to do is explore this choice board and find out the pictures that you think you're capable of doing in your situation or that you are interested in doing. Now that we've been through 6 full units, we've learned about aperture, shutter speed, depth of field. We've learned about composition. It is now time to take your time and really compose your pictures to be stunning photographs. So I'm not going to see any work that's imperfect. From here on out, I need to see some polish to your work, okay? So let's go through each of these and see how you can create these and maybe which ones will be best for you. So the first one is a creative self-portrait. A creative self-portrait is doing a self-portrait, but is not a selfie. A selfie, typically you're holding your phone and you're looking at yourself and shooting yourself like that. A creative self-portrait is where is more intentional. You're setting up the picture so that your camera is on a tripod or it's being held by somebody else or it's being held up by books and you have it on a self-timer. In these pictures, this is a famous artist, Francesca Woodman right here. She just photographed herself looking through a broken mirror. And here, my student set herself up next to a mirror and took a picture of herself that way. So it does not look like a selfie, it looks more like a self-portrait. And here, the same idea. Set herself up on a tripod and took the picture. And you can see she added film grain to hers and did a little bit of editing. Also in this picture, she took multiple pictures of herself and then collaged them digitally together. If you click the home button, it will take you back. And we can look at the next one is Rembrandt lighting. We learned that in the lesson number 1. I included a picture, a painting by Rembrandt, and this is the type of lighting that he preferred. So Rembrandt lighting is light that comes from one side down at an angle and creates this upside down triangle on the cheek. So you can see that's created very subtly right here and more defined on this picture. The butterfly lighting, these are 2 student examples that were taken last year. So you can see a use in black and white. This one's really interesting because it has a nice composition and some interesting textures behind. But you can see the classic butterfly shape right here and again right here, creating really nice mood lighting. So you really need to pay attention to the background. How does it add or distract from your image? This image was created by having a black or dark background, and then as long as your light is far enough away from the background, it won't illuminate the background. So you have to kind of step your subject away from the background and get your lighting away from the background so no light is falling on there, and then you'll get yourself a black background. The next one is a candid portrait. A candid portrait is one where it is not staged. You catch somebody in the act, and it's more of an authentic picture. Actually, in this situation, the photographer was doing a formal portrait, but in between shoots, you can see she was looking off to a friend who was making her laugh, and then therefore she caught her in the middle of a laugh, and it made it a candid portrait. An environmental portrait is a lot different than a candid portrait. An environmental portrait is actually a staged portrait. So in this picture, the photographer went to Mr. Moore and asked him and made an appointment to see if he could photograph him in his office space. And she set up the lighting. She set up his hands to be on the desk and made sure that he is looking at the camera. This is not a candid picture. This is an environmental portrait. And in this situation is another self-portrait here. And she set it up so that she has a background, an environment that shows the records that she likes. She brought in props for her coffee, and then she set it up on a self-timer. So you can do an environmental portrait of yourself if you wanted to, but it has to be in an environment that makes sense to who the person is. So Mr. Moore is photographed here in his office with all the trinkets of the information about his family and about his job. She is photographed with her music and her interests. You could think about doing an environmental portrait of maybe a chef in a kitchen, or say your brother is really into soccer and you could put him in soccer clothes and have a soccer ball and have him on the field. So it's within that person's environment. It is posed and they are looking at the camera. The next photograph we are going to look at is called a couple's portrait. In a couple's portrait, it does not mean they are romantically involved. It just means two people who have some sort of relationship. So in this relationship is a friendship. And this relationship is a friendship as well. And in this one, this student made a creative portrait and he didn't have anyone else to photograph at the time. So he did a couple's portrait with himself by doing a double exposure. Notice how nice this photographer has arranged the picture so that the gesture is very dynamic. The way he's holding his hands like this, and he has his hands crossed. Head is tilted inward to bring this whole composition together. It's a really strong couple's portrait. Next up is a group portrait that is 3 or more. This photograph was done inside the photography studio. And you can see it was fun and playful. It could kind of remind you of a cover of a band album or something like that. Next up is a single still life item. Here are 3 examples. In this example, the student sprayed an apple with water and then just did a very direct light right onto the top of the apple so that it really went off into shadows in the background. This one, she put a skull on a mirror and then photographed it so you can see the reflection. And in this one, she used a fog machine to create fog around the skull. So each of these, the background is really, really important. You don't want any extraneous information in the background unless it's actually adding to the picture. Oh, and by the way, those 3 pictures, each of them were done in a bedroom or at their house. So these were not done in a studio, a professional studio. Okay, next up is multiples. Here's an example. It's multiples of the same still life. So you could have 2 skulls, you could have a bowl of apples or anything like that. So anything that has multiples. Then a product advertisement. This product advertisement over here is actually from my brother's company called Beard Brand. And I just wanted to show this as an example. The photograph has 3 of his products, but then he also added a potted plant right here and this wood background, and then this like marble-like surface right here. So all of these add to the whole dimension of the product photograph. And here, I wanted to share this with the US student, did this ring combination using just a black piece of construction paper. So a small piece of construction paper that's kind of swooped in the back, and that's easily done for your background. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And then here, the student used a really short depth of field, and it looks like it was done inside of his house. You can see some lighting, but you really can't tell where it is because he used such a short depth of field. It blurred out the background and put focus on the pin, and that's his subject. Oh, and one more thing. When you are doing a product or an advertisement, Try to use brand new products or brand new materials, because you don't want a worn down Nike shoe to be your advertisement. You want it to look brand new. So find products that look brand new. You can think about nail polish, and you can even have it dripping out. You know, there's a lot of different effects you can do. You might want to look into it. Okay. Next up is a food still life. So that's using food as your main subject. So it could be a bowl of food, it could be a plate of food, but really you have to take it beyond just a snapshot of your plate of food. You really have to think about design. Go to Instagram and look at different still life, food still life pictures you've seen. This photographer did this at home and used a skull and used fresh fruits and then a fresh roll of brie, and then put it onto a book. So you have to be very intentional. This cannot just be snapshot food at this time. Okay, next up is a thematic still life. This is any kind of theme that you choose. It could be about music. It could be about love. It could be about hate. It could be about anything. This is about games. And this is about like her trinkets that she has in her house, and she used the mirror for it too. And notice how the colors really respond to each other in this picture. They really both composed it in that way. He just used a textured piece of paper that he found in the classroom that was blue, and then a textured piece of paper that was for the background. So this is just two pieces of paper, one laying down and one standing up, that he taped against a wall. And he was able to make this composition. And this is just on a mirror. Next up is a headshot portrait. A headshot is black and white, and the purpose of the headshot portrait is for the possibility of getting a job in acting, or for any kind of performance, or for a job interview. You might send in a headshot. And typically these are kind of dynamic. It means this is kind of tilted a little bit. He has his hand in the picture. He has the texture of his shirt, nice moody lighting. And also you have to have more of a serious look to you. You shouldn't be a goofy smile with all your teeth showing. This has got to be more of a professional shot right here. After the headshot, you have a choice of doing a close-up portrait. That's very standard, just getting in close. A profile portrait, this is a self-portrait done as a profile, and this was a photograph of a model and using a blue hue to it. And this one was done of a model using a silhouette to get the profile picture. So these are all creative uses of the profile portrait. And then finally, the 3/4 turn. I'm showing two different versions of the 3/4 turn. Here's a version where his shoulders are almost squared away, and here where her back or shoulder is turned towards the camera and she's looking kind of over her shoulder. Both of these have 3/4 turn because you can see the shape of the nose and the lips and the cheekbone, as well as both eyes are looking towards the camera. This is a really stunning portrait right here. You got the nice split lighting that's slightly broad, but also split, and really cool folds happening right down here. So for this entire project, yes, you could use yourself as a model, but you need to set yourself up using a tripod and using a self-timer. And you've got to be prepared to take at least 5 pictures per composition. You need to play around with composition, move it to the rule of thirds, move it vertical, move it horizontal. Practice using leading lines. Really think about your backdrop and your shadows. Where are the shadows falling on your picture? I want you to spend a lot of time creating these pictures. So you're only choosing 5, and I really want you to focus in on those 5.